You're listening to the Purpose Pursuit podcast with me, Hannah Miller. This episode is free to access. This podcast is here for women who are in the middle of life, who are holding a lot and running on empty. They're ready for something to shift, but they don't know where to start. If that's you, start with my free 5-minute What's Next for Me check-in. It'll help you pinpoint what's keeping you stuck and what to focus on first. You'll find it in the show notes. So I want to start by just telling you something really fun that I've discovered in the last couple of weeks. I got an email with a graphic attached to it saying, "Do you like this graphic, Hannah?" And I had no idea what it was because nobody had actually told me. But my book, Purpose Pursuit, is now in German. So if you are a German speaker and would rather listen to the book or read the book in German, you now can. It's also in Australia, by the way. So if you live in Australia, you should now be able to get it. It's called Hello Purpose in German rather than the Purpose Pursuit. And it says, in 8 Schritten zu einem Leben voller Sinn und Erfüllung. I don't know what that means. I'm presuming it means something like in 8 steps, find a life of more meaning, something like that. But maybe German speakers can let me know. I thought that would be really fun to tell you. So Germany, here I come. So moving completely swiftly on from that little fact, have you ever thought, or do you ever find yourself thinking like, is this it? Do you ever catch yourself in moments, like not necessarily even mundane moments, but, you know, maybe you're driving your car or you've got a moment yourself or you're washing the dishes or doing something where you just find yourself having a bit of a niggly feeling of like, is this the fullness of my life? What if it carries on like this for the next 10 or 20 years? And I think when we're hitting the middle point of life, and I use that as quite a wide phrase, you know, the middle years, we're no longer young adults and we're not necessarily in the final years of our life. There's a lot of like undercurrent reassessment that might be going on. And I wonder if you've felt this. And I want to gently say, I'm not talking to the people who are in a situation where, well, I could be, but I'm not mainly speaking to people whose life situation is really difficult and you want everything about your life to be different. I'm actually talking about this underlying feeling of it's like a subconscious fear that you might be wasting your life. That's kind of where I want to go today. Your life is actually fine. You know, there are things that could change, there are things you might want to be different, but it's not like you're looking and thinking everything is terrible and horrific and I've missed it. But there's this niggly fear, this subconscious feeling that's growing, especially as the years come by, that you think, is this it? Is this actually my life? Is this everything I thought it would be? Is there things that aren't happening that I thought might? Is there this growing feeling of disappointment? And I'd probably like to do a separate episode on disappointment at another time, but you're full, it's responsible, you've got lots going on perhaps, but you just feel a sense of, is this everything I thought it was going to be? And if we're honest, that feeling can really grow. And if I'm honest, I've had that feeling many times over the last few years. And I would say that my life is pretty full. It's got so many good things in it, but there's this feeling that's coming, which comes with a bit of age and time, that I think is important for us to note. There's all sorts of reasons why this happens. And I do want to talk about what some of those reasons are with you. First of all, I think it's important to say this is not about abject panic. I'm not talking about a crisis moment where you're like, this really has to change, but this like sense that something is off, a restlessness, a bit of disappointment, some comparison that you start to lean into and you start to think, you know, is this really who I thought I'd be? Is this really where I thought life would be? And it's where your life and your expectations are beginning to collide in a way that you perhaps didn't expect it to. And I want to talk about why this fear exists and where it comes from. And I do think it's exacerbated by the 9 years anxiety. I talk about this in the book. When we're reaching milestones, sometimes, you know, 29, 39, 49, 59, there can be this unsettling that takes place for whatever reason, where we associate that 9 with like a precipice of what am I going to do with this next period of my life? And people find themselves going in one of two ways. They either do something quite desperate or they realign themselves with a new goal, which is better. So that can be going on in the background. But I think there's a tension that's going on underneath here, which grows as we get older, that is something that we are challenged by. And that is the desire for meaning, the desire for the fullness of life, in tension with our desire for safety. There's something called loss aversion. I think Daniel Kahneman talks about this. Please don't quote me if I'm wrong. But loss aversion is this predisposed idea that we feel concerned about the potential for loss or things not working out. So we gravitate towards safety. It's also this idea of like status quo anxiety, that we stick with the status quo because actually the fear of what might happen or the loss of safety means that we just opt for what we know. We're a version of the potential for loss. We don't want to upset the status quo. So we actually trade that for that sense of safety and lack of tension. We trade that sense of meaning for it. Or we also find that life just creeps towards safety because of a set of natural circumstances that take place. I look at my 20-year-old and sometimes, I'm a little bit jealous. I'm jealous of his freedom to think, I'm going to go to Kyrgyzstan for the summer. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to do this with my time. Because, of course, that pursuit of adventure and meaning is more difficult for me because of some of the natural factors in my life where I have to and am designed to preserve some safety. I'm a parent, so I'm in a protective role, even though my parents are older. My children are older. There are responsibilities that come with that mean my priorities have shifted. And yet, we still have this tension inside. Just want to say, my neighbours are having an extension. I'm going to probably repeat this over the next few episodes that you hear. So if you can hear some drilling and some noise in the background, I'm sorry about that. So the safety aspect is we need a stable job because we need to recognise, choose safety. It's a difficult world out there. I need to make sure I can provide for my family. Obviously, that's really important and necessary. I need a predictable path because I need to be able to follow that and know where it's going. And I need to make a sensible choice because I can't just blow everything up because I have a mortgage to pay, children to look after, or bills to pay, or whatever it might be that sort of creates a bit of a fence around the amount that you can explore because you need a sense of safety. And arguably, as we get older, our desire for safety grows. I can see that in my own way of viewing the world. And I definitely could see that as I watch my own parents age. The desire for predictability and safety and removal of fear was definitely something that kind of happens with age, right? My mom was quite a daredevil when she was young. I've known many stories of the things she used to get up to with her brother. And yet I know she worried about my boys playing rugby. She worried about things happening to people in a way that when she was young, of course, that attitude to risk and adventure wasn't there. So there's something that's taking place that is normal, but inside of us there's still that child and that person who's longing for meaning and longing for that sense of feeling alive. So you could be trading some of that sense of meaning, aliveness, alignment, this is my life feeling, for safety. I've even heard it called golden handcuffs, not just around money, but the idea of this route of my life, I feel like I'm in some sort of handcuffs to because there's too much to give up. And yet something within me is longing for a bit more. And also added to this, we have an infinite comparison situation now. We can see so much more of what's going on in other people's lives. We can see, we can see so many more people's lives in so much more detail. Once upon a time, you'd be able to compare yourself to your neighbours and your friends and your family. And now you can compare yourself infinitely to an infinite number of people, pretty much. Their situations, their circumstances, their lives, their kitchens, their lounges, where they shop, what they do, what they look like, what their family looks like. And of course, it's not reality anyway. And we are infinitely comparing to ourselves, which is creating another layer of this, well, that's not what it looks like for me. A sort of underlying dissatisfaction that can drive us to make better decisions, but also can leave us feeling wanting in a way that's perhaps not helpful. There's also this time anxiety that comes in as we get older. Chris Gilbo's book, Time Anxiety, covers two types of time anxiety. There is the time anxiety that comes from, I've just got too much to do and I haven't got enough time. That's present day time anxiety. And then there's another type of time anxiety, which is I am running out of time. And so obviously, the older we get, we become more aware of that. I am more aware than I ever have been of the fact that time is passing. I can see time passing on my face. I can see time passing in my body. I can see time passing in my energy levels. I can see time passing as I look at my children and their faces and they're growing up. I can see time passing as my son tells me he's getting married and so on and so forth. And that feeling is wonderful and it's a privilege. And I regularly remind myself that time passing and aging is a privilege. But you do also become aware that line of time is getting shorter. And so things can feel sometimes a bit more pressured or anxious. So it's like, am I using my time well? Does my life mean something? Is it going to count for anything? So we've got the life milestones, the 9 years. We've got the infinite comparison problem. We've got time anxiety of getting older. And then what we do is we just stay busy. I do this all the time. We stay busy. We carry on with what we're doing to avoid actually facing this feeling. We avoid it. We just fill our time with stuff. We keep the noise up. We keep the stimulation high. We continue to work through our list and we just avoid actually facing this. And then there's something around regret that starts to come in too. And I've mentioned this book before. There's a book by Bronnie Ware. Bronnie Ware was a palliative care nurse. And she wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, which was based on her interactions with the people that she served and cared for over her years in palliative care. And she lumps it into 5 specific regrets, which were the top regrets of the people that she met. And she tells some of her own story, actually, that she'd actually started off in a career that she shifted from, and how actually she had to make a decision to make a shift of her life. And some of that came from an interaction with a lovely lady called Grace that she tells the story of in the book. The first regret in the book, there are 5 regrets, and the one that kind of fits with today's conversation is that the biggest regret of the dying was this: I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. And she tells this story of Grace, who had lived a life in quite difficult circumstances, and she'd stayed put and she'd stayed in this situation and she hadn't made the change. And Grace actually says, it's not like I wanted to live a grand life. I'm a good person. I didn't particularly wish to harm anyone, but I wanted to do things for me too, and I just didn't have the courage. Why did I put up with it? Why, Bronnie, why? She says as she dies. And she says to Grace at the end, she begs Bronnie, she says, promise this dying woman that you will be true to yourself and you will be brave enough to live the way you want to live. And that's not, to throw everything out and say, I've got no responsibilities, I'm going to do what I like. But there is a longing in so many people at the end of their life where they recognise they didn't follow things that they wanted to. And it's only as time passes that we realise that we don't have unending time to do that. And I think, as I reflect on my own life, I think, how do I engage with that feeling of future regret right now and avoid it? How do I think about what I want my life to look like so that it reflects that a life where I don't say at the end, actually, I regret that I didn't live, a life true to who I was made to be. And I don't think what Bronnie's talking about here, that this is about making a selfish life. It's not about saying, well, I'm just going to blow everything up and do what I want. That might be nice for a period of time, but I think that could leave things quite hollow and empty. But it is about thinking, am I on track towards some of the things that I thought my life would include, that I would have an opportunity to do? And alongside that, addressing some of the fact that sometimes our expectations aren't going to be met and we are going to face some disappointment. So I think there are 3 big misconceptions. One is that I need to blow my life up and I've got to do something absolutely wild in order to address this feeling. A second is that I should feel more certain that you're trying to decide your entire future from this tired, overloaded place, and I can't get certain, so I'm just not going to do anything about it. And I think sometimes we think that because you feel like this is something wrong, and maybe a more helpful way to look at it is not that something's wrong, but there's something that matters to you that you need to pay attention to. Perhaps that's more helpful than a right-wrong attitude of thinking, how do I get more aligned? How do I listen to this feeling and think, is this it? And make peace with the fact that the life I've chosen will have constraints, but also what can I do within those constraints? I chose to have my children when I was young. So I was 23 when I had my eldest son. And with that brought brought constraints. It meant that there was a whole load of things that were not available to me if I was going to be present for my son. But it also brings a whole load of opportunity. So, actually thinking about your life and recognizing the constraints you're in, the financial constraints you're in, the family responsibilities you've got, the things that matter to you, starting with that picture and then thinking, where is there flex within those constraints, is more freeing than just imagining a life that actually you are not able to live. There are some things that are not available to me. It is not available to me to go and move to Australia on my own. I mean, I could, but that's literally if I want to turn my back on everything that matters to me. So it's not an option for me to do that. It's not an option to just, completely, throw everything in the air. But there are options that are there. And sometimes we can be a bit binary as people. Well, I can't do anything because of. And so we don't do anything. And so this pod is to kind of encourage you a little bit today that you can do something. We can reduce the pressure and we don't have to completely change everything this month. But we could stop and get honest about what's going on in our life. What gives me energy? What doesn't? What drains me? What gives me life? What am I noticing about the way I'm feeling about life right now? Where is there some misalignment? Where is some of this being exacerbated by busyness, by potentially perimenopause, by a really busy season or other life events that are aggravating my thinking? Where is there a sense of regret or disappointment or anxiety? They are different things. Regret, disappointment, anxiety. Is there some stuff where you're feeling resentful or flat or just off about? And is it that you're feeling that just once in a blue moon, or is it starting to feel like something that's a bit of a pattern that you need to notice? And I love the idea of life experiments and tiny tweaks. And you'll know this from my book. You'll know this from my course if you've done it. It's about making shifts that get you closer to where you want to be, because shifts are manageable and shifts can compound. So you add a shift to another shift to another shift. And before you know it, things have really moved on for you. And they're so much safer to do in the middle of life for most people than they are to do something really dramatic that is not available to most people. And you can just explore it. You're not necessarily committing. It gives you the opportunity to reduce the risk in these situations. And I think the last thing I'd say here is, I talk about this a lot, but we've got to reconnect with meaning. And sometimes we can look at our life and think, is this all it is? Because we may not have reached certain achievements that we thought we might. But can I ask you to look back over your life and think, where has your life had real meaning? What are some of the things you've done that leave a legacy that nobody else might notice? I really feel passionate about this. Now, it doesn't mean we can't achieve and have meaning. Of course we can. But if push comes to shove, the regrets of the dying suggest that the stuff that has meaning is the stuff that we should be thinking about. And, I would hope that there are things about my life that I may not get a best-selling book that's had millions of copies sold, but I could have children that love me and are living healthy lives because of a foundation that I've been a part of. And if I had to trade one for the other, you know which one I'd pick and you know which one you'd pick. So stop and think about some of the meaning that you've put into your life and the lives of the people around you and how valid and valuable that is. And actually, when you look back at your life, that's the stuff that you'll be most proud of. But if you're feeling something's off or misaligned, there are some things you can do. You can begin to experiment. You can begin to say something out loud. I've created a tool that's free to use that might be helpful for you, just to at least have as a bit of a starting place. And we'll put the link in the show notes. It's a bit of a assessment tool called What's Next for Me. And we'll make sure you've got the opportunity to access that. It's free. It will give you a report that helps you understand a little bit more about what's going on. And it's something that you can use practically to do that first step towards, what is going on for me and where is this misalignment coming from and what could that next step look like. One next step every month means that in a year you've travelled quite a long way. And you could look back and say, actually, now I'm doing this, which I never thought in a million years I would do. But it won't necessarily come from you doing something that's beyond the level of courage and constraints you've got in your life right now. And a final thing to think about, if everything remained the same for the next 5 years, how would you feel? And if you're like, actually, I feel good about that, then great. But if you don't, it's in your agency to do something about that a little bit at a time. Pay attention to stuff. Don't keep thinking about these big life decisions that you're going to keep putting off, and instead think about the tweaks and the changes that you can do that feel less threatening and less overwhelming, and learn and take some feedback from that. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It's been really lovely to be with you again today. Take care. Bye-bye.